for those tickets.
Let's get into the reason I wanted to bring you on was because there's going to be a an election for prime minister in Canada, eh? And according to this, Liberals projected to win majority, odds at 99%. Hate to sound like a broken record, but this is just based on polls, and polls don't vote. Liberals need to vote, and then we can reach 100%. Vote any day at the election. So here's what you had to say about this. I just want to show a very short clip.
With certainty that I have never told anybody how to vote, but I certainly let people know what I think of them, depending on who they vote for. And if you vote for a liberal, you are an idiot.
Okay.
There's no. Well, first of all, Jimmy, to go back that tweet, if it's from a legit liberal, they are delusional and they are pathologically dishonest. It's the odds are not 99% that there's going to be a majority liberal government. And so help me, I won't use the Lord's name in vain. If there's a liberal majority government, enjoy the hell that you've ushered in. But the odds were way out of wonk. Like it was at 70 some odd percent that it would be a majority liberal government. And can you imagine what a degree of idiot you have to be after a decade of liberal devastation to reward them with a majority government? I mean, look at the damage they did with a minority. You have to be an idiot, corrupt idiot, or employed by the state and fearful of losing your job if the Conservatives come in, and or a member of the media who will be defunded if the Conservatives come in. And so what are you going to do? You're going to make up every lie on earth to sway the public opinion, the narrative, to manufacture the consent of a majority liberal government. But I'll say it every day of the week. I never tell anybody who to vote for. But I will tell you what I think of you if you do vote for somebody. If you vote for the Liberals, you are corrupt, an idiot, or worse.
Yeah, I've really the Canadian Liberals are just as stomach churning as the American Liberals, especially over the last 10 years or so. What I don't what has happened to Canada? I always looked at them as better than us, smarter than us, but they've become these authoritarian nightmares, and they're putting in this guy Carney, who, by the way, is an international banker. Yeah, he seems like the exact thing everybody should be rising up against. This WEF puppet, this governor from the Bank of England, and now he's running Canada. How does that make sense to anybody?
It's political amnesia, political ignorance, or just partisan hackery. Everyone has to understand this. Over the last decade of Justin Trudeau and the Liberal rule, everything has gotten worse in Canada, and
way worse.
Everything: child hunger, poverty, inflation, crime, everything. Euthanasia. Canada's become like the state-sanctioned murder capital of the world. I think Brussels is worse. Everything has gotten worse. Healthcare system has gotten worse. Taxes have gotten higher. Crime has gone up. Violent gun crime has gone up. Childhood poverty, childhood hunger has gone up. Everything. Food bank lines are longer. Censorship is up. Everything has gotten worse.
But the decriminalization of hard drugs in Vancouver certainly worked out, right?
Vancouver is the fentanyl capital of the world, or at least it's colloquially referred to as the fentanyl capital of the world. Jimmy, I was on with Dr. Drew last week or so, and I asked Drew, I was like, do you know how many Canadians OD from opioids monthly? I won't ask you because I don't want to. If your guess is wildly inaccurate, I don't want to do it to get embarrassed. 600 and some odd people die monthly in Canada from opioid overdoses. 80 some odd percent of which is fentanyl related. So when the Liberals come in and the Conservatives to some extent and say Trump is imposing this tariff and it's unfair and unjust and pretextual, ignoring the fentanyl crisis that we have in Canada, you have super labs being busted basically weekly. You got Chinese precursors. If you haven't had Sam Cooper on, you got to have Sam Cooper on, true Canadian journalist, talking about the Chinese infiltration in Canada. It's become basically a political hellscape in Canada, and in many ways a social hellscape. And yet somehow there are sufficiently political amnesiac, if that's the word, idiots out there who are going to vote for the people to come back in power who have devastated Canada in every respect. You can't make it make sense, except for the fact that, I don't know, to some extent the Conservatives are not proving themselves to be the saviors of Canada. They're just trying to do what they think they need to do politically to eke in, and then you just have to hope the Conservatives are going to be better than the Liberals. But to vote for the Liberal, to vote for your abuser, it's Stockholm Syndrome at a national level.
So the problem is they don't really have a really good alternative, right? I mean, Carney is horrible, and I would definitely never vote for someone like that. Um, I mean, he's like almost like a symbol of what's wrong with the West. Like just like Kamala Harris was and Joe Biden. Um, here is that I got this from you. Here's Pierre Polvier. How do you pronounce his last name?
Poilievre.
That's such a there's no,
Poilievre.
there's no way I'm going to be able to do that. So I'll just call him Pierre P. He says socialism means poverty and dictatorship. Democracy requires freedom, free speech, free thought, and free markets. So here's what your response was. Or maybe criticize. So here he is. He was congratulating Doug Ford and his team on a strong majority win. You go, hey, maybe criticize the guy who enforced lockdowns, police state curfews, mandatory vaccines, and the like. Pierre P is not because he got reelected that he's not a tyrant.
Well, and underneath that was the one to the Cuban thing. Bear in mind, everybody, the dates on these are 2021,
Right.
2022. When Canada's in lockdown, I'm under 5.5 month freaking curfew in Quebec, and admittedly, that's a provincial decision, not a federal one. But you got Pierre Poilievre coming out and talking about freedom of speech and freedom of association in Cuba when we're being locked down and forced to being subjected to vaccine mandates. And then he goes ahead and congratulates Doug Ford, the dude who locked people down, wanted to use the police to basically have the right to stop and question anybody for being out of their homes. No, go ahead and congratulate him because that's good politics. You're right. We don't have not even a Trump-esque alternative in Canada. We don't have a principled capital C conservative. We don't have a principled constitutionalist in Canada. I mean, other than Maxime Bernier of the People's Party of Canada,
who's not viable.
He's not viable. I mean, I can admit it, but you can get a few seats in the House so you have real opposition. But it's so frustrating. I have been consistent and critical of Pierre Poilievre for 4 years because he has been consistent, waffling on the most critical issues: free speech, censorship, medical mandates, the endless support for Ukraine, and now that's the only alternative, and everybody's like, well, he's the lesser of the evils. Well, congratulations, you still end up with evil. And this man, I've been saying, Pierre, we just had the longest mischief trial in the history of Canada over the trucker protest. Chris Barber and Tamara Leach, they were both convicted on mischief for participating in the trucker protest. Does Pierre Poilievre come out and say this is malicious prosecution, politically motivated, and an embarrassment for Canada? No. And what do the conservatives say when I say, why the hell have you not said anything? Oh, he's got to play it safe. You don't want to associate yourself with toxic stuff in Canada. That's not how you get elected, Viva. It's politics. If politics is selling your morals and your principles, you'll end up with what you get. And he hasn't said a word, not boo, about police abusing independent journalists. Free speech, my butt.
Well, that's kind of ironic, right? Because here he is saying democracy requires freedom and free speech, and yet here it says Canada, Mark Carney vows internet speech crackdown if elected, citing online pollution of misogyny and conspiracies. And here's just one quick paragraph from that op-ed. It says there are many serious issues that we're dealing with. This is from Carney says this. This is what Carney,
today or yesterday. It's very recent.
He says there are many serious issues that we're dealing with. One of them is the sea of misogyny, anti-Semitism, hatred, and conspiracy theories. This sort of pollution online that washes over our virtual borders from the United States. First of all, the conspiracy theories, the biggest ones are always come from the government and the corporate media, right? Just like all the conspiracies they said about the truckers, that they were violent, that they were Nazis, that they were white supremacists, all that stuff. That came from the government and the corporate media. So the biggest liars are always them, and a distant third is the randos on social media. Am I right?
No, there's no. I replied to this and I said everything they accuse their adversaries of is true of themselves. It's confession through projection, and you go through this one by one. In as much as there's anti-Semitism in Canada, it's probably as a direct result of immigration policies that the Liberals have enacted. To the extent there's misogyny allegedly in Canada. Justin Trudeau's the guy who allegedly groped a reporter and then had to apologize for it. He's the guy that elbowed an NDP parliamentarian in the boobie in Parliament. He's the guy that fired Jody Wilson-Raybould, the first Indigenous Minister of Justice and Attorney General, because she wouldn't adhere to his corrupt demands not to prosecute his big boy friends at SNC Lavalin. This man is a misogynist through and through. The Liberal Party just had two of their candidates, Chrystia Freeland and Karina Gould, couldn't get 10% of the vote to Mark Carney, the three passport-carrying globalist whore. And they disqualified Ruby Dalla, another Liberal member who's also a woman and a person of color. They disqualified her on a Bolsonaro-esque, Marine Le Pen-esque accusation of election improprieties, and they disqualified a popular candidate who would have given a run for his money to Carney. They are the misogynists. They are the anti-Semites. They are the phobes and isms and whatever you want. But they come out and say, "Oh no, it's social media platforms, and we better close down the virtual border." I mean, what's he suggesting with this other than banning X in Canada?
And Pierre P is afraid to stand up to this kind of stuff because it might be bad for elections.
He has come to the conclusion because people I've always called Pierre a fair weather politician. He supported the trucker protest very briefly when he thought it was cool and politically palatable to do so. He came, he gave some donuts, took some pictures, photo op at a breakfast, and that was during the week when it was cool to support the protesters. Then after the commission, he came out and actually had the audacity to refer to the protest as an inflation protest, not a trucker protest. So he's a fair weather politician who's listening to think tanks, and right now the people in his ear are telling him it's cool to be TDS, anti-Trump, anti-American, because it'll get you the centrist votes, and that's what you need to do to get elected. You don't want to be too toxic. You don't want to be too Trump-esque, even though they still accuse him of being Trump-esque. And so adopt some of the strategies and adopt some of the tactics of the center leftists so that you can get their votes. Meanwhile, what happens is NDP, who are lefter than liberals, are going to vote liberal, and any liberals like, do I vote for Carney or Poilievre? Well, if they're indistinguishable, you're going to vote for the devil you know, who happens to be worse than the devil that your old boss. I just need to, before I forget, Mark Carney is a new face to many people. He has been advising Trudeau for damn near 5 years. He's not an unknown. He's not an outsider. In addition to being a globalist banker, an anti-populist, an anti-Brexit, in addition to being everything that NDP liberals should hate, three passport-carrying globalist whore attended Davos meetings. He gave talks with Bill Gates. He attended Bilderberg. He's an invitee to Bilderberg meetings. Rubbing elbows with Bourla and the like. He has been involved in the Liberal Party and Trudeau policy for 5 years. He has been advising Trudeau to implement crippling natural energy climate crisis policy in Canada.
The carbon tax?
The carbon tax, which he eliminated. I say, you eliminated your own stupid carbon tax, and you want credit for this. You think people are stupid. And by and large, they are stupid or brainwashed. But no, implementing crippling climate crisis policies in terms of emissions on Canada, net zero by 2050, whatever. While he's simultaneously, through his asset management company, Brookfield Assets Management, investing in dirty polluters down in Brazil, out in the UAE, who are not subject to these crippling environmental policies. And his explanation, in a moment where Pierre Poilievre actually shined, he says to Pierre, well, there's different systems. There's different, every country has its place in this. And Pierre Poilievre says, so it's a double standard. You impose crippling energy policy on Canada while simultaneously investing in dirty energy elsewhere through Brookfield Assets Management. And you don't think that's hypocrisy? He says, no, it's not a double standard. He's corrupt to the core. And most people don't know it. And I just hope everything that's holy, there's enough time between now and the 28th for people to realize this. And then they'll have to say, look, do I bite the bullet and vote for the lesser of the evils who lack principle, lack courage, lack balls? Lack political testicles to say what is right, even if they think it might be, appreciated badly by the general public. The reality is Canadian media is going to poop on Pierre no matter what he says or does, because he says he wants to defund them, and Carney, the globalist whore, says I want to near double their funding if we get reelected. No matter what he says or does, it will get spun badly by the media, and he's taking the coward's way out.
What's cool?
It's a lose-lose up there. It is a lose-lose. So Mark Carney tweeted this out. So this speaks to your point. He says, we've got a lot to build in this country, and we need a lot more builders. So we'll cover training costs and make it easier to... First of all, what you guys act like that you haven't been in power for the last.
10 years. And why do they have a lot to build? Because they've let in however many millions of immigrants over the last, since 2020. They're like 500,000 a year, I think, now.
Yeah.
The population growth in Canada is 97+% immigration. And by the millions, which is why you have a lot of them on terror watch lists trying to cross into the United States from Canada. But, it's Trump is being pretextual with his tariffs. They've been in power for 10 years. You know how long they've been promising to build more houses, to make housing more affordable? 10 years. 2015, it was Trudeau's campaign promise. 2017, 2019, 2021. And still the housing crisis, because China and other countries are coming in and buying up land and buying it up, laundering their money out of their corrupt countries into Canada and jacking up the prices so that everyday Canadians of all races, creeds, and whatever can't afford them. And bringing in so many immigrants that you have no housing for them, and then saying, oh, God, this time we'll really solve the problem we created. And yet, people are stupid enough to actually go ahead and vote for these jackasses a fourth time in the last decade.
So let me just finish this tweet. He says, so they're gonna cover training costs and make it easier to work anywhere in Canada. It's going to be a great time to be in the skilled trades. Well, let me just show you this tweet that I found this morning on the Twitters from someone named Bruce. He says hundreds of foreigners line up for a minimum wage job, but we also need 5 million Indians because of the labor shortage. The number one election issue to Canadian voters is not even being discussed. Is that true? They're not even talking. You've got this is a long video, but it's lots of hundreds of people lining up for minimum wage jobs, and they're importing people still, workers into Canada.
It's insanity. The Trudeau government was letting in foreign students by the boatload. I mean, pun intended. And then they come out and say, companies and universities are exploiting of this policy, so we've got to tamp it down. That was before Trump came into power, and then he says, no, now we're going to open our borders to any refugees who want to come into Canada from the United States. It's insanity, and which is why I've been very hard on Pierre Poilievre. Some might you think it's because I don't like him and I'm criticizing him. Others, if you had half a brain, you might want to think, set aside my intentions. It might be to make him a better political candidate. Immigration should be the number one issue of this entire election. It isn't, because of the Trump tariff threat and then the reprisals or whatever, the fighting back from Carney. But the problem is Pierre Poilievre took the bait on that and started fighting directly with Trump instead of exploiting of that opportunity, because it wasn't a stick in the wheels of the conservative election campaign. It was a gift. It was a layup. That all that Pierre had to do was just slam that ball into the net, and he didn't. He could have come out and said, look, tariffs, whether or not you think it's pretextual, we've got big problems in Canada, and it's all the Liberals' fault. He didn't. Immigration is a massive, massive problem. You've got areas in Canada speaking neither English nor French. You can call me a xenophobe or whatever the hell you want to call me, saying, you come to Canada, you better speak one of the two official languages, and if you don't want to speak that language, go to the country, that language you want to continue speaking, and it probably will involve staying home. But you've got places like Brampton, Ontario, they don't speak English or French. You got official police putting out official police videos on Twitter in Punjab. You got people in Vancouver, I forget what city it is in Vancouver, telling Europeans, you go home, this is our country now. And nobody's talking about immigration. Pierre has made this election about the tariffs. Holy hell, I mean, it's such a missed layup and such a missed opportunity. You can think I'm criticizing Pierre to tear him down. I don't care what you think my intentions are. He should be adopting this advice to build it up. But you got too many so-called capital C conservatives in Canada saying, Viva, that's not how elections are run. You ran a losing campaign for the PPC. We'll do it this time. To which I respond, conservatives have lost 3 elections in a row. So don't lecture me as a member of a new party with barely 2 election cycles. It had 1 election cycle under its belt. Don't lecture me on victory, you 3-time losers, and it looks like you're teeing it up for a 4th-time loss.
So instead of Pierre talking about immigration and the all the downstream problems that causes, housing costs, one of them, employment, obviously, he's going to parrot what Carney's doing, and he's going to talk about tariffs and Trump. That's what he's doing.
Well, he has, the hilarious thing is that Carney is sort of parroting a lot of Poilievre's, or some of Poilievre's key points. Polyev has always run on Axe the Tax. Carney comes in and, put it in quotes because it's a questionable whether or not he actually axed the tax. He cut or at least temporarily suspended, even if he had the legal right to do that, only the consumer portion of the carbon tax. So corporations still have that tax, but the consumers no longer have to pay it. So price at the pump is going down because it went up because of their stupid ass policy. And Pierre doesn't come out and say they think you're stupid for temporarily canceling their own policy. Like he ran on Axe the Tax, Carney absorbed it. He ran on lowering taxes, Carney's absorbing that, even though they're lowering their own taxes. But yeah, he played into a stupid tactic of getting into this TDS stuff, and I have no doubt it's because people are telling him to do it. But the reality, it should be immigration, it should be drugs, it should be these open air safe injection sites. He's talked about it in the past. What is so irritating is that he's not talking about it now. I say, why hasn't he come out and talked about no men and women's sports? Not a controversial thing. Even 80% of all of Canadians agree on that. Why hasn't he? Oh, he can't talk about that. That's too Trump-esque. Like, it's like he's shooting himself in the foot by trying to placate people who will always demonize him regardless of what he does, and in so doing, losing his base, the people who actually want to vote conservative and now feel totally abandoned in principle and in policy.